Me again, Sam Osborne. You might remember me from some of my previous episodes. The dry clean, tyres, how to plug your tyre, and suspension. Well, I'm back, and today we're going travelling. Well, not really, because we all know we can't do it at the moment. But when you do go travelling, you'll know exactly what you need to pack with you in your bike bag to make sure you'll be sorted when you get yourself to the races. Right, so we're going through my travel kit that I'd pack in my bike bag every time I go to a race. Some of these things are self-explanatory, some maybe not so much. So, tyre sealant, we all know we need sealant, especially when we're chopping and changing tyres. We know how much of a fan I am of the dry clean. Here's our spray, here's our brush, and always, of course, we must lube our chains. We'll start with this little guy. He's a pretty trick little piece of equipment. It is in fact a torque wrench. I like this one. It's an Ice Tools torque wrench. It's super light, and I think the most valuable thing you can put in your toolkit that's not going to weigh a ton. We all know playing airline roulette, we need all the help we can get. Tyre plugs, tyre levers, and a set of brake pads. We all know what we're doing with those. Allen key set, self-explanatory. This guy here, he's a T10. That's the TORX key that does my grips. The B-gap tool, we spoke about that one when we did the dry clean. This guy, I think he's a bit of a trick. It is a tube, they call him a tubolito. Super compact, super light, always goes good in the kit, and always nice to strap on your bike for your race. Mudguard, for when things get a little bit wild. I love these guys. These are little numbers from Syncross. Super tidy, they just slide onto the fork. A couple of bolt holes here at the back, and I'm all about a tidy bike. Nice clean. Bearings, I like to carry a spare set of bearings from the bicycle for my hubs. I'm running i9 wheels, so these are obviously specific to them. Got a different size chainring here. My go-to is usually a 34. I'll usually turn up to a race with 34 tooth chainring on. 32's one of those ones that I put on for some really outrageous courses. And of course, when changing chain rings, the TORX bolts are super niggly. Lots of people always round them off, so I've always carried a spare 3 set of those. This guy is just the TORX key for the chainring bolts. It's really annoying when you've got the axle coming out of the cranks to try and get a normal TORX key in. So this one's super long, and you know, you can never have too many spares. A few more spare bolts in there as well. Now, something probably a little bit more random sitting on my table is some spare boas. This is the boa dial and the boa wire. Believe it or not, every year I've gone away, I've always managed to break a boa or a wire. So now one of these lives in my toolkit permanently. The other thing that commonly I break sometime during the year is a seat post clamp. I think we're just undoing and doing these things up so many times, the bolts eventually get stressed and they snap. This guy here is a spare bolt that goes through the middle of your crank that holds it on to the axle. When we're taking these off, changing chain rings a lot, the torques that these require, we're going up to 54 Newton meters now, which is some crazy torque. Always carry a spare one of those. Cassette and chain tool, pretty self-explanatory. These days I try and travel with 2 sets of wheels. I've got my really fast tyre combo on, and then a slower tyre combo on. I don't have 2 sets of cassettes. So that's my option, race morning, if I want to do a last minute tyre change, cassette chain tool, whip it off and away we go. Now this is probably some of the trickiest stuff that we've got here on the table. This here is my track pump, folds out. It's quite a cool little thing that Toe Peak does. Digital dial, we know how particular we are getting with tyre pressures now. One of these guys is our air shot. So when we're dealing with tubeless tyres, we always want to try and get that popping sound. Really hard to achieve with a track pump. So this guy here, we attach it to our track pump, we pump that up to 200 psi, and then we can dump all that pressure into a tyre in one hit. Makes seating tubeless tyres so much easier, and I think an absolute must-have in the toolkit. Spare valves, dealing with tubeless, sealant, really sticky mess. So I always like to carry a couple of spare valves and some spare valve cores. Gas canisters, we all know why we're rocking with gas canisters. Handy little tip with these guys, drop them in your toiletry bag that goes in your bag that doesn't travel with your bicycle. Gets through TSA every time. I think they just think it's shaving cream. And this guy, probably the most left behind thing. Really personal to the bicycle that you ride is a derailleur hanger. I can't believe how many times I see athletes turn up at a race and they run around like headless chooks because they've broken a derailleur hanger. The most common thing to get bent in travel and the hardest thing to get, especially if you're running a brand that's a little bit out of the normal. Always travel with a derailleur hanger for your bicycle. Shock pump, we know why we're traveling with a shock pump. And these guys, disc savers. We pop these in between our brake pads when we take our rotors out. So if we pull the brake by accident, or when TSA's creating absolute havoc in your bike bag and they press the brake by accident, you're not going to be at the other end with your pads closed all the way in. One of these guys to save you a little bit of a headache. Now, if there's one thing that probably doesn't fit everything else I've laid out on the table, is this guy. It's Radix Nutrition. It's not a tool, but obviously we're going lots of very different places when we're traveling away. We're not always going to get the food that we're used to at home. This is a New Zealand company, Radix Nutrition, doing some pretty amazing stuff in the freeze-dried meals. So good, you wouldn't actually know it's freeze-dried, but we know what we're getting when we boil the jug and drop it into here. We know it's nutritious, it's going to taste good, and it's not going to make us sick. And of course, last but not least, a bicycle bag. These things are pretty important, believe it or not. The things I look for in a bike bag, we always want some wheels at the back and some really good strong ones. The other thing I look for in a bike bag is a handle really low down. These ones that kind of sit halfway up or more to the top, by the time you've been dragging those around a train station, don't expect to be swimming at the other side when you turn up to the race. I'm using a Scott one, I really like these. They've got tent holes through the middle. Always add a little bit more foam when I'm packaging my bike. Once again, TSA, they love going through our stuff. And the thing I like about the Scott one is they come with their own frame pads. Wheels sit in here, and the other thing that I've found, unfortunately through a little bit too much of trial and error, is trying to get wheels that aren't going to compress in on your rear swing arm. If the centre hub is compressing on that rear swing arm, chances are that rear swing arm is going to break in travel. That's why I've gone for the Scott one. Evoc, I've had a really bad run. I've had 2 or 3 swing arms broken in travel, and I think it's just from where the wheels are sitting and resting up against my rear swing arm. Now, how do you fit all this stuff in? I just roll with a good old toiletry bag. So put as many tools as I can into my toiletry bag. Hopefully you're traveling with some friends. Obviously this is a lot of gear. The liquids are the things that adds most of the weight. Everything else, I've done a pretty good job in trying to find the lightest that I possibly can.